The taxi dropped her off just after sunset, when Houston's sky was still smudged with streaks of burning orange fading into purple dusk. Alina stood on the cracked sidewalk with her suitcase at her side, staring at the house she had rented. It was smaller than she expected, narrow, leaning slightly as though it carried centuries on its shoulders. The paint had once been white, but now peeled in ragged strips, grey wood exposed beneath. Two narrow windows stared at her from the upper floor, glass dulled and warped, reflecting the last of the evening light like dead eyes. She hugged herself against the breeze that seemed too cold for early summer. Her landlord had called it a charming fixer-upper. Online, the listing had promised quaint southern character. But standing here now, with the dying light catching the edges of the house, Alina thought another word fit better. Abandoned. A neighbor shuffled past on the opposite side of the street. He was an older man, skin like weathered leather, a baseball cap pulled low. He slowed his walk just enough to look at her, then at the house. His expression tightened. Without a word, he shook his head once, disapproving or maybe warning, before moving on. Alina forced a smile, though he was already gone. People and their superstitions, she muttered under her breath. She was 27, a doctor who had just transferred to Houston's medical center. Her life was measured in shifts, patience, and exhaustion. This house had been cheap enough to rent on her limited budget. That was what mattered, not the gossip, not the whispers of curses she'd half heard at the leasing office. She dragged her suitcase up the creaking porch steps. The wooden boards groaned beneath her weight, like an old man sighing in pain. Inside, the air was cooler than it should have been, a lingering chill that clung to her skin. She flicked the light switch. Nothing. The bulb above flickered weakly once, then went dark. Great, she muttered. She had brought a lamp in her suitcase, but the place clearly needed rewiring. The living room smelled faintly of dust and something sour beneath it, like milk gone bad. The wallpaper peeled in curled strips, revealing older wallpaper beneath, patterns of faded flowers layered over decades. The house carried its age like scars. Still, she told herself, it was hers for now. A roof, 4 walls, a space of her own. She unpacked the essentials: lamp, kettle, 1 book she always carried for comfort. By the time she made a quick dinner, night had fallen outside. The street lamps buzzed faintly through the thin curtains. When she sat down on the couch with her food, that was when she heard it. A long, steady exhale. Alina froze. It wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't the hum of the refrigerator or the pipes in the wall. It was deeper than that, closer. She held her breath and listened. There it was again, a low inhale, ragged and hollow, followed by a long, tired sigh, like lungs straining after too many cigarettes, like someone pressed against the wall, breathing in her ear. Alina's fork clattered onto her plate. She turned her head slowly toward the wall beside the couch. It was bare plaster there, a water stain creeping from ceiling to floor like a crooked shadow. The sound seemed to come from inside it. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to laugh softly, though it came out thin. Old houses settle, they make noise, that's all. She ate in silence after that, trying not to listen, trying to convince herself it was the pipes or the wind. But when she finally turned off her lamp and slipped into bed upstairs, the sound followed. Every time she closed her eyes, she swore she heard the house exhaling around her. The next morning, she woke groggy. She hadn't slept much, drifting in and out of shallow dreams. She made coffee with her portable kettle and opened the front door to let in fresh air. Across the street, the same old man from last night was watering his patchy lawn. He looked up at her, then at the house, then spat into the grass. "You shouldn't be in there," he called. Alina blinked. "Excuse me?" He set down his hose. "That house, people leave it alone for a reason." Her first instinct was irritation. "It's just a house." His gaze was heavy, almost pitying. "No, it breathes." The words struck her harder than they should have. She fought the urge to glance back at her windows. "People around here talk too much," she said firmly. "Thanks for your concern." Shook his head again, slower this time, as though watching someone walk willingly into fire. Then he turned back to his hose. Alina shut the door harder than necessary. She went to work that day, long hours at the hospital, and almost forgot about the house. Almost. The memory of that sound clung to her, though, like dust in her lungs. When she came back that night, the air inside felt heavier, thicker. Her skin prickled the moment she crossed the threshold. She set her bag down and stood still. The silence pressed around her, waiting. And then, faint but certain, she heard it again. Inhale. Exhale. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. The walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. The house was breathing. The breathing was worst in the stairwell. Alina learned that on her third night, standing midway between floors with the light off and her palm pressed to the rail. The banister vibrated faintly, like a throat learning how to swallow. She pictured dust motes as alveoli, the whole house inflating, exhaling, deciding whether to keep her. She didn't turn the light on. Turning on lights made the darkness step back and gather itself for later. She'd learned that as a resident, working nights. Better to let the dark sit with you and see if it blinked first. Downstairs, an eddy of cooler air slid along the hall and lifted a corner of the runner. That was how she noticed it. A ripple where the rug met the baseboard, as if something beneath had sighed and shifted. Alina crouched and pinched the rug's edge. It peeled back with the patient stickiness of old glue. The floor beneath was not the same scratched oak as everywhere else. It was a plywood square slightly proud of the boards, its edges badly cut, as if someone had measured in anger. A hatch. She went to the kitchen for a butter knife. The drawer handles were cold, a damp copper cold, and she wiped her palm on her jeans. Back in the hall, she worked the blade into the seam. The wood resisted, then relented with an almost organic pop. When the hatch lifted, the air that came up smelled like paper and pennies long after a nosebleed. She reached her arm into the square and found not a crawl space, but a hollow the size of a shoebox. Dust made the back of her throat sting. Her fingers closed around twine and a texture like dried linen. She pulled up a wrapped bundle, then another. 3 in total, each tied with twine that slipped like hair as she unwound it. Inside were notebooks. 4, then 5 as she realized 2 were stuck together by age. Black covers crazed with fine cracks, corners blunted, no lock, no title. The house exhaled again, slow and pleased. She carried the stack to the kitchen table, turned on the smaller lamp she'd brought from her old apartment, and sat. The table was scarred with rings from glasses set down carelessly and lines where someone, years ago, had cut bread too forcefully. She opened the first notebook. The inside front cover had a name in pencil, smudged but legible. Clara Beaumont, June 1958. Under it, as if Clara had thought better of being so specific, the year had been erased and written again, 1959. Under that, stop looking. Alina smiled despite herself. We're already past that, she said to the room. The first page began in the careful print of a girl who had been told handwriting mattered. This is to practice. Mrs. K says writing every day makes your thoughts tidy. I think that's true about rooms, not thoughts, but she is right about bread. If you cut it with a dull knife, you make it bleed crumbs for a long time. Daddy says, use the good knife or don't cut at all. The entries were ordinary at first. A list of chores, a fight with L, presumably a sister, a note about the heat, and the way the cicadas sang so loudly that summer it felt like a fever. On the 5th page, the handwriting loosened. The lines sloped like a tired shoulder. Tonight, the walls sounded different, not the rats. Mama says rats sound like coins, like they carry their own noise with them. This was breath, in and out. Elle says it's the house settling. I told her houses do not settle like sleeping creatures. They creak like old people going to pee. Alina caught herself laughing once, then not again. She turned another page. Mrs. K says if you name a fear, it shrinks. The man in the shadows did not shrink when I tried to name him. He comes quietly. He stands where the hall narrows and there is that dent in the wall from when Daddy moved the wardrobe. I put his name here, so maybe that helps. There was a line, then a single word written lightly at first, then darker, as if Clara had been teaching herself to pronounce it. Blue. Alina looked up, reflexively, to the porch pillar outside the window. The dot she'd found yesterday, new paint, craft store smell, sat there like an eye. She went back to the diary as if returning to a vein. I do not think Blue is a person exactly. When he stands in the hall, I feel that damp feeling like when you forget to wring out a rag and it sours. He breathes and the house breathes with him. He is not in the mirror. He is in the place you don't look because you think you already saw it. He comes when the weather says calm. The radio man said advisory of quiet. Elle laughed and said that's not how advisories work, but it is how he works. Alina turned another page, the edges rasped like sand. Blue likes when the house is polite. When we keep doors just a little open, Mama says a house needs to circulate. Mama thinks I mean a prowler when I say there is a man. Daddy says get the good knife. I put the knife under the mattress. I am not brave, but I am awake. Something in Alina shifted. The sentence hung on the room's silence like a pendant. She glanced at her own bed upstairs, at the way she'd left the door cracked last night, because closed doors made the breathing sound worse, not better. She flipped farther, trying to scan for the part she had really come looking for. Something that could be made into a reason, a shape, anything but a curse. The entries were dated sporadically, sometimes 3 to a week, sometimes 1 after 2 blank months. The ink changed color once. A page had water damage at the top, a scalloped stain like a little coastline, July 12th. The house learned my step. If I move quick, the board by the pantry sighs like a person who thought you'd say something and you didn't. Blue stood at the bottom of the stairs last night. I did not see his face because he keeps it where the light doesn't want to go, but I felt him thinking. He is a thinking that happens to you. I said you can have my breath if you leave Elle alone. I don't know why I said that. It felt like when you put your hand on a dog's head and the dog goes still. He does not take all the way. He takes enough that you dream shallow. Alina's chest tightened. She realized she'd been breathing shallow since she opened the hatch. She forced herself to fill her lungs and the house seemed to do it with her. A long parallel intake. Outside, something metallic ticked as it cooled. A car, maybe, or the heat pump next door. She kept reading because not reading felt worse. August. 3. Mrs. K says not to feed stray cats because then they belong to you. Blue is like a cat made of corners. If I make tea late, he comes and stands near the door. He does not like closed doors. He teaches the hinges to breathe with him. Daddy says we need to get the hinges oiled. Mama says don't spend on what you can quiet with manners. August 9th. If you put a match in water and lift it out, the tip is still a match, only it will not light right now. I feel like that. Not ruined. Deferred. Alina touched the margin. The paper was unexpectedly soft. She turned the page and found a pressed leaf, stuck there, a live oak leaf, brown and brittle, veins like a net. Beneath it, Clara had written, E. Says the blue dots are for the county, but the men who paint for the county whistle, and I did not hear whistling. I heard breath. Alina closed the book gently, as if the words might seize and crumble. Her hands were cold. She rubbed her forearms and opened the second notebook. Clara Beaumont again on the front, the year scratched and re-scratched, as if time kept failing to hold still. The tone changed. The careful print loosened into a faster hand, the sentences, longer, like a girl racing her own thoughts. September. Elle is sick and Mama says it is the heat leaving her too quick. I heard Blue in her room when the light made stripes on the wall. He was not in the stripes. He was where the stripes ended. I put a bowl of water on the floor like you do for the cat that never comes when you call. In the morning, the water had a skin on it like milk. Mama says that's just the house being old. I do not think age can make water pretend to be something it is not. September later, I tried to draw him. It made the page colder. He is the feeling of the corner of a photograph of someone's hand. He is the noise a radiator would make if it could apologize. There was a sketch. Not a man, but a doorway, darkened as if shadow, had thickened there like cream. Across the bottom, Clara had written small, "Do not color it in." Alina felt the childish urge to shade it anyway, just to see what happened. She didn't. The older neighbor's voice drifted back to her. "You shouldn't be in there." It had sounded less like warning and more like knowledge you give up reluctantly because it isn't believed. She flipped forward. On a page near the middle, Clara's handwriting faltered, then steadied. October. "I think blue is not one thing. I think he is what the house remembers when people forget. When you forget to thank a door for letting you through, he stands there and reminds you how to be small." October later. The radio said, "Calm advisory." Daddy said, "What in God's name is a calm advisory?" We laughed like people who still have all their breath. A blot of ink darkened the lower margin, like a dropped period that had become a pit. Alina breathed in and the house followed or led. Hard to say. She rubbed at the ink pit with her thumb and found it still slightly raised after all these years, as if the paper had never fully forgiven being asked to hold so much black. Another page, November that. He stood at my door and taught the door to breathe. It is like sleeping in a chest. The house inhales, and you stretch and forget why. The house exhales and you think of the bottom stair that squeaks when you are late. L is better now. Blue does not take much if you put the good knife in the wood under your bed. He respects an edge. Alina remembered her own butter knife, its dull, civilized shine. She looked at the counter where she'd left it, and felt, absurdly, that it was seeing her. She turned to the back of the notebook. The final page had only one line. "He comes when we forget our names or ours." She sat back. The lamp's shade had collected a little country of dead gnats, tiny bodies making a dust that didn't look like dust until you moved the light. She flicked the lamp off, then on. The kitchen reverted to that two-tone darkness of cheap rentals, the blue of the street lamp and the yellow of a bulb trying to pretend it was warm. There were 3 more notebooks. She eyed them the way a hiker eyes the next rise, knowing there is another beyond it. She made tea because she didn't know what else to do. The kettle wobbled and hummed, and she told it, out loud, "Thank you," because she didn't want to forget being small in the right way. When the water steamed, the window fogged and drew its own breath. She cupped the mug and opened the 3rd notebook. This one began differently. No date. Just a sentence that felt like a finger pressing lightly over her mouth. "If you are not me, close this and put it back where the floor keeps secrets. If you are me, remember, do not strike the match unless you are ready to listen to what it says back." A match. Alina's pulse skittered. She could feel the shape of the box she kept in the drawer by the stove, the cheap cardboard, the matches with their abrasive red heads. The word match made the air seem granular. She read on, "I saw him properly once. He is not a man with a hat like in the moving pictures. He is a permission. He is the little open that doors prefer. He is the ink the house uses to write on air. He is blue because that is the temperature of a breath you did not know you were holding." Alina closed her eyes and pictured the pillar again, the neat, thumb-sized dot. Blue was a decision disguised as paint. L says, "Mama will sell this house once."
Daddy finishes the work.
The work never finishes. Work is a way to stay where you are without admitting it. Mama says, "When the weatherman warns calm, we will light a candle and make the house feel company." I think matches are rude unless you ask the dark first. The breathing in the stairwell deepened as if it had been waiting for its cue. From upstairs, a hinge murmured. The front door, which she had latched, she was sure she had latched, clicked delicately, the way a throat clears before saying a name. She set the notebook down and went to the hall. The door was still shut. The latch tongue lay proper in its slot, but her fingers felt the wood around it and found the faint warmth old friction leaves. Something had considered coming in, and then remembered its manners. "Not tonight," she said. "Not yet." Back in the kitchen, she read the final pages until the ink, the air, the words all seemed the same color. December. Elle slept through the knocking. Mama says it was branches. I stood by the door with the good knife and the match. I did not light it. I said, "Be kind before you are brave," and he went away like someone who had been seen. January. Mrs. K moved to Galveston to live near her sister. The new teacher says we should keep gratitude journals. I am grateful for the blue dot on the pillar because it makes a promise, even if I don't know what it is. I am grateful that Blue is polite. I am grateful that he taught me how to listen, without asking for everything. I am grateful for my name. The last entry was smaller, sidewise in the margin, as if Clara had not meant to write it and then did. If you are here later and breathing is a hard job, open the door a little. Leave the match where the threshold can see it. A small light is enough for a promise to keep. He likes a promise that doesn't brag. Alina shut the book. The kettle had gone silent. The tea tasted like something patient. She gathered the notebooks, as if they were sleeping things, wrapped them again, and set them aside, not in the floor, not away. The patch of open boards where the hatch had been looked expectant, like a mouth waiting for a spoon. She didn't feed the house yet. Instead, she took the matchbox from the drawer and set it on the threshold with its lid closed and its label turned up. She opened the door the smallest amount. "Not tonight," she said again, "but soon." The air that moved across her knuckles was cold and smelled like the idea of rain, even though the sky was clear. The street was empty across. The way the old man's porch light was on, a moth bumped it and wrote its brief name in dust. Alina closed the door gently. She turned off the lamp. The house breathed, and she breathed with it, the way you do when someone you love is sleeping and you borrow their rhythm until yours feels safe. Upstairs, in bed, she slid the butter knife under the mattress, not because she believed in knives, but because Clara had, and belief is a kind of hinge too. The last thought before sleep took her was not of curses, not of ghosts, but of a girl who had practiced making her thoughts tidy and had discovered the tidy thing. Inside, a fear is a promise. Somewhere in the house, a hinge whispered, "Thank you." The hospital never truly slept. Even at 2 a.m, fluorescent lights hummed above tiled corridors, machines beeped in methodical rhythms, and soft wheels of gurneys whispered down the hall. Yet tonight, as Alina walked past the long row of rooms, she felt the building had borrowed the house's breath. Each hallway exhaled, each doorframe inhaled. Her shift had only just begun. She was assigned to the surgical recovery wing, a quiet place usually filled with sedated groans, monitors, and the clink of IV poles. She should have felt relief. It was the easiest assignment, but instead her stomach pressed tight, as if bracing for something unseen. On her way to the nurse's station, she passed room 211. The patient inside, a woman recovering from gallbladder surgery, stared at the ceiling with eyes glassy but awake. Alina smiled gently and whispered, "I'll be right back." The woman's lips moved. At first, Alina thought it was thanks or a complaint about pain, but then the words reached her clearly. "He is the permission." Alina froze. The phrase was exact, not similar, not coincidental. Exact. From Clara Beaumont's diary. Her throat tightened. "Excuse me," the woman blinked, as if confused. "Water," she said hoarsely, as though she had asked for nothing else. Alina poured from the jug and handed her the cup with shaking fingers. The woman drank greedily, then drifted into the shallow rhythm of half-sleep. Permission. The word clawed her chest as she walked to the station, the rest of the night unspooled like thread from a fraying spool. Mr. Rodriguez in 213, waking from anesthesia, whispered in Spanish, "La casa respira," the house breathes. The teenager in 219, recovering from an accident, laughed weakly to himself and murmured, "Be kind before you are brave." By the third patient, Alina's hands began to tremble when she wrote vitals. Her pen carved shaky numbers as though the diary itself was tugging her fingers. No one knew about the notebooks. She hadn't told a soul. She hadn't even brought them to the hospital. They were locked in her car, wrapped and hidden beneath the passenger seat. Yet the words had traveled like spores on a breeze, infecting the halls. At 3:17 a.m., she stepped into the break room to calm herself. The vending machine glowed with cheap candy. The refrigerator hummed. On the table sat a styrofoam cup of coffee someone had left behind, steam still curling. She pressed her forehead to the cool window. Houston's skyline blinked in the distance, the lights hazed with humidity. She whispered aloud, "You don't belong here. This is just exhaustion, hallucinations." But the glass fogged under her breath. And then, faintly, another fog bloomed back, as if someone stood on the other side of the glass, breathing in answer. Alina stumbled back, knocking the coffee cup to the floor. It spilled like blood across the linoleum. Her chest ached. The hospital felt less like a workplace, more like a stage where Clara's diary had chosen to act itself out. When she returned to rounds, she carried herself like a soldier walking trenches. Each door might open to something more than a patient. In 223, an old man with Alzheimer's sat upright, though his eyes were empty. His lips trembled, then formed a clear sentence. "Do not color it in." Alina's heart lurched. That had been written beneath Clara's drawing, the doorway sketched in shadow. She leaned close. "What did you just say?" The old man stared through her. His jaw slackened. A thin line of drool slid down his chin. His monitor beeped steadily, indifferent. Alina backed out of the room. By 4 a.m., fatigue sank into her bones like sandbags. But it wasn't the usual heaviness of night shift. It was the weight of listening too hard. Every cough, every sigh, every creak of the hospital seemed coded, whispering in Clara's voice. When she charted, she found herself writing fragments that weren't hers. The house inhales, you stretch and forget why. She scratched them out, her pen digging furrows into the paper. Sana, her closest colleague, noticed. "You okay? You're pale," Alina forced a smile. "Didn't sleep well?" "Try to breathe. Calm advisory tonight, huh?" The storm warning said it's unusually quiet for Houston. Alina's pen dropped. Calm advisory. The words Clara had written about the weather. She grabbed Sana's wrist, whispering too sharply, "Don't say that phrase again." Sana frowned. "What phrase?" "You just..." Alina stopped. Sana's eyes were clear, confused. "Human. Not puppeted." "Never mind," Alina said, releasing her. Later, in room 229, a boy of 8 recovering from appendectomy lay curled like a shrimp. He stirred when she checked his IV. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently. He shook his head, eyes wide. "The man's outside." Her throat constricted. "What man?" "The one in the shadows. He stands by the door and teaches it to breathe." Alina's heart slammed so hard the monitor picked up her own pulse instead of his. She forced her voice steady. "No one's outside, sweetheart. Just the nurses." But the boy pointed at the door. "Not people shadows, the other kind. Blue ones." She tucked him in quickly, whispering, "Sleep." But when she turned to leave, the door did sigh. A soft exhale, as though hinges had lungs. The rest of the shift dissolved into dread. When dawn leaked into the sky, pale light smearing the windows, Alina signed off charts with shaking hands. She walked to the parking lot like a hunted thing, each step hollow. Her car sat under a flickering street lamp. She unlocked it, slid inside, and pulled the notebooks from beneath the seat. She needed proof they were still there, that she hadn't somehow brought them into the hospital unconsciously. The twine was tight. The paper covers were cold. They were real. But a new page had appeared. She was certain the second notebook now ended with an entry written in hurried script, different from Clara's neat hand. The hospital whispers now. "They have learned my phrases. If you read this, remember, he is not confined to the house. He walks where you work, where you sleep. He follows the sound of your name. Do not speak it too loud." Alina dropped the book onto the passenger seat. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Somewhere behind her, in the waking hum of the hospital, a hinge sighed again. And in that sound, she heard it. Soft, slow, certain, breathing. The house met her at twilight, the porch boards giving that slow vertebrae sound they made when temperature shifted. Houston's heat had collapsed into a wet, peach-colored dusk, and dragonflies stitched the air over the unmowed lawn. Alina stood at the gate for a full minute before she could make herself enter. After the hospital night, even the cicadas felt like the grinding of unseen teeth. She wasn't alone on the sidewalk. A woman waited there, arms folded, purse strap clutched in both hands as if it might keep her from drifting away. 60, maybe, with brown-grey hair pinned into a deliberate bun and a face like one of those old houses that survive storms because it learned when to bend. A neighbor, then? Alina had seen her once or twice watering a rosebush that refused to thrive. "You're the renter," the woman said. "No greeting." Her eyes flicked to the house, then back, as if the two of them were whispering behind Alina's back. "I am," Alina said. "Alina," the woman winced, a tiny, involuntary flinch at the name. "Keep your voice down," she said softly. "On this street names carry." She offered a tight smile to soften it. "I'm May. I live over there." She jerked her chin at a single-story shotgun house the color of damp paper. "I brought you something." From her purse, she produced a ring of old keys, fat-bellied bronze, not the kind that fit anything built after 1950, and a small jar of salt with masking tape on the lid. On the tape, in ballpoint, was written, "For thresholds." Alina let herself laugh once, a sound with no humor at all. "Is this a welcome basket or a threat?" "Both," May said. "And an apology." "For what?" "For not coming sooner." They stood in the heavy light, each waiting for the other to blink first. When neither did, the heat decided, pushing them toward the porch like a big, polite hand. Alina glanced up at the transom window above the door. It was open a sliver the same way she'd left it, to let the house breathe, because that superstition had snuck into her bones the way mold sneaks into plaster. A varnished scent lifted from the railings, sweet and old. Somewhere inside, a long seam of air shifted like a body turning in sleep. "Can I show you something?" May asked. Alina hesitated, then unlocked the door. "Come in." May didn't. She touched the jam with her fingertips, then rubbed them together, testing for dust. Wakes quicker when it's clean. We can talk on the steps." She sat, not touching the metal of the rail, skirt tucked under her like the hem might pick up whatever lay in the iron. "How long have you been hearing it?" Alina swallowed. "Hearing what?" May smiled without pleasure. "No one ever wants to be first to say it. The breathing, the walls, the way the hinges sigh like they're tired of holding back a room." Alina shouldn't have felt relief, but she did. A sharp, guilty exhale that left her lightheaded. "Since the first night?" "It is worse when you work nights," May said. "The house doesn't like whoever leaves it alone in the dark. It sulks, then it performs." "Performs?" May's eyes moved to the narrow front windows. "It puts on people you love. It borrows their sounds. Phones ring with numbers that don't exist. The radio catches your grandmother's voice. That sort of thing." Alina tasted metal, the hospital's late-night coffee clinging to her tongue. "Has it always been like this?" "No." May shook her head. "There was a time it was just a house with bad plumbing and a smell like old pennies. Then they came." "They?" May took the salt jar from her purse, turned it, rubbed the tape label with her thumb. "You know how this city is built? A layer of bayou and a layer of history, and a layer of concrete, and a layer of wishful thinking. If you dig, you always hit water and bones. 33 years ago, a man rented this place who called himself a pastor. People liked his suits and his sermons and his tender way at funerals. He gathered a little flock, young mostly, girls who cut their hair blunt to look serious, boys who wore thrift store ties and practiced shaking hands." Alina's skin prickled. She could feel the front room at her back, like a patient who has decided whether to crash. What did he preach? That everything that hurts can be eaten by something bigger, May said. That grief is a spirit you can feed, that if you lay it out just right, sorrow will come to table and take what you cannot carry. Alina looked at the threshold, the hairline crack in the sill that looked like a healed cut. "Did you know them?" "I baked them a pecan pie." May's mouth twisted. "They were polite, the way thirsty people are polite. They held hands and hummed. They put blankets over their laps in July. We called them The quiet church. We heard singing sometimes, but under it, something like a long, low... She searched for the word. Breath. Alina's fingers, without permission, made little crescents in her own palm. The funerals were always at night, May said. They said they preferred the honesty of darkness. The first two were old folks no one argued over. The third was a girl who went north to see family and never came back. We didn't know what we were seeing until we did. By then, the wallpaper inside this place was wet as a tongue. Alina closed her eyes. Ritual, she said. It wasn't a question. Murders, May said simply. 2 in the cellar, they called it a prayer room back then, 1 in the parlor. The city papers named him, the courts tried him, the jail kept him until his heart stopped. But the house kept what they did here. It learned their rhythm. That's what ritual is, I suppose, a lesson you teach a room until the room can repeat it without you. For a long time, the only sound was the insects, that dense, unembarrassed music of the South. Somewhere on the cross street, a car passed, baseline, juddering the air like a second pulse. Inside, the house answered with a slow settling, but no, that was wishful thinking. The house sighed. I'm sorry, May said at last. She set the keys on the step between them. The landlord should have told you, even if the law didn't make him. Folks around here talk like it's bad luck to speak the story, but silence is just a way to decorate a wound. Alina touched the keys, heavy, cold. Why are you telling me? Because you look like a person who tries to keep promises, May said. That sort of person is bait for a place like this. It lets you believe you can fix what's hungry by feeding it gently. Alina snorted, surprised by a flare of anger. Then what would you have me do? Move? Leave all my things on the curb and run? I can't afford that. I signed a year. I paid first and last. People always think they can't, May said, not unkindly. I won't tell you to go if you're going to stay. You need to know how to sleep with your shoes by the bed and your name quiet. My name? Say it less, May said. To the mirrors, to the dark. The house likes to learn your edges by listening to what you call yourself. Alina was suddenly furious with the simplicity of the advice. Salt and silence? And sunlight, May said. Hate it. Open the curtains in the morning. Open them all. She stood, knees popping. And if you hear it ask, may I come through? You say nothing at all. Do not give permission. That word is a key. Alina looked at the jar. The masking tape edge had been trimmed neat as a hospital bandage. The thought made her throat ache. Thank you, she said, because some rituals are good, and the thanks felt like one of them. May nodded. If it presses the walls, she said, and now her voice was a whisper. Do not touch the bulge. Do not lay your hand on the shape. You'll turn the plaster into skin. She stepped backward off the porch, as if leaving 2 quickly might draw attention. I'll leave the porch light on. If you need me, knock 3 and then 2. 3 and 2? Alina asked. So I know it's you, May said. And the way she said you made Alina want to say her name aloud, like a talisman. She didn't. She listened to May's footsteps go down the walk, the street gravel crunching like soft bones. When she finally went inside, she did what May had said. She opened the curtains on every window, letting the last of the evening in as if it were a disinfectant. The house resisted at first, the rods stuck, the rings squealed. But then the fabric slid, and the light came, and the air felt briefly like a room, not a throat. She set the jar of salt on the mantel. She placed the ancient keys in a bowl by the door, though she doubted any of them fit any lock she owned. She drew a line of salt thin as a sentence along the threshold, feeling ridiculous and grateful in equal measures. The house breathed. It was softer in the light, like a big animal pretending to sleep because its keeper had walked in. Alina stood in the parlor and tried to understand the geometry of her fear, where it began, how far it reached. The diary lay on the coffee table where she had left it, a wedge of brown paper that had cut her life into before, after. She didn't touch it. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Sana, you alive? Alina. At home. Neighbor stopped by. Long story. Sana. Is the long story the reason you keep texting me at 4 a.m. that your building inhales like a smoker? Alina stared at the screen, thumbs hovering, the urge to tell everything colliding with May's warning. Alina! I'm okay. Gonna try to sleep. Sana, eat first, then sleep, eat or armor. Alina smiled despite herself. Yes, Mom. She ate a piece of bread standing at the sink because chewing felt like proof of life. Then she turned off every light, except the little one in the hallway and the lamp in the parlor, low and amber, like a lighthouse too tired to do anything but suggest where the rocks might be. She washed, brushed her teeth in the bathroom with the hateful mirror she had draped with a towel the second night. The towel had fallen. She didn't remember letting it. In the wet glass, her face looked like someone else's, eyes too dark, mouth a straight, punished line. She thought of saying her name to herself, and didn't. In the bedroom, she left the door half open, a compromise with whatever walked the halls. She lay on her side with her shoes beside the bed, just as May had said, because if belief is a doorway, then obedience is at least a chair shoved under the handle. The house settled around her, timbers giving their small medicinal pops. The ceiling fan ticked the same rhythm as the nurse's station clock. Outside, a siren flared and vanished like a match in water. Sleep came and took her by the wrists. She slid down into it, grateful, as deeply as a person falling through lukewarm lake water, eyes open to the fuzzed bright above. Sometime later, 10 minutes or 2 hours, the house exhaled so deeply the bed moved an inch against the floorboards. That's what it felt like. That's what she swore it was. She surfaced into thin grey, heart running ahead of her like a dog. The lamp in the parlor sent a meek trapezoid of light across the hallway, enough to make the doorway look like a mouth wanting to speak. She didn't move. She listened. The fan ticked. The refrigerator coughed in the kitchen. Her phone pulsed once on the nightstand, an algorithm reminding her to breathe and drink water, which would be funny if it weren't so stupid. Then the wall pressed. It began as a swelling above the baseboard, a slow, deliberate push from the other side, like plaster making a fist. The paint lifted, straining into a pale, rounded bulge the size of a hand, then the size of 2 hands, then a shoulder. Alina's whole body went cold in neat, surgical sections. Chest first, then scalp, then thighs, as if someone had opened the window of her skin and let weather in. "Do not touch," May had said. "Do not lay your hand on the shape." "Okay," Alina whispered and clapped both hands hard over her own mouth to keep the instinct from skipping out of her body. Her palms smelled like salt and cheap soap. She stared as the bulge found new edges, a slow moving of pressure along the studs, a head shape pushing between them and withdrawing, testing, not yet certain of its own dimensions. The plaster made a small sound, the wet pop of a tongue releasing. From the roof of a mouth, it was obscene because it was ordinary. It was the sound of kitchens, of jars opening, of fingers tugging tape from cardboard, except it came from painted gypsum in a house that had learned a sermon. The bulge eased upward toward the light switch as if curious about the finger smudges there, then slid down, pressed low, moved along the baseboard toward the door. It paused at the threshold like a guest waiting, as if there were an etiquette to hauntings that even hunger wouldn't break. And then, as gently as a gloved knuckle on wood, 3 knocks, then 2. Her heart spasmed, the exact pattern May had given her as a sign. Her mouth filled with heat, anger, bright as fever. "Don't be clever," she thought, though she didn't think at whom. The wall swelled again, a barely visible dome in the lace shadow of the hall lamp. She could see the grain of the paint, the hairline cracks like spiderwebs radiating. She thought of bones growing wrong after a bad set. "Do not give permission," she breathed into the cage of her hands. The house inhaled. The plaster held its shape, then pressed a fraction harder, like a child leaning into a locked door because it has heard the word no and knows what to do with it. From behind the bulge came a sound as soft as cloth exhaling. Not a voice, but a word with no letters. Her phone buzzed again. She flinched. On the screen, a text from an unknown number. "May I come through lowercase?" Plain. No punctuation, but the one that wasn't there. She didn't own a smart home. She had no connected devices. She had set 2-factor authentication on everything because the hospital's IT training had taught her to be suspicious of convenience. Still, "May I come through?" Her name would be the key. That's what May had said. The house learned you by listening to what you called yourself. The shape in the wall waited, as if the text had been a polite knock at a second door. She put the phone face down on the pillow. She turned her head to the plaster. She counted breaths. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no, she became, instead, a brace of muscles and a jaw, a person-shaped refusal, a cathedral built from staying still. The bulge eased away, slowly, as a pressed thumb lifted from bread dough. The wall's surface returned to flatness without apology, leaving only a faint crescent crack where pressure had tested paint. The house exhaled, disappointed. In the parlor, the lamp dimmed for a moment, then steadied. Somewhere in the venting, a hush moved like an animal changing rooms. Alina waited 10 minutes by the bathroom clock's soft tick, 10 long minutes measured by blood and patience. Then she sat up, legs shaking so hard the mattress whispered. She pulled the diary off the coffee table without leaving the bed, stretching until her spine clicked, then reeled it back like a fish. She opened to the last entry she'd read. There was something new beneath it, in a hand, that was neither Clara's neatness nor the frantic script she'd found in the car. This was careful, young. The letters were small, as if trying not to take up space. If you refuse the first time, he learns your shape. If you refuse the second, he learns your silence. The third is the one that matters. Do not be kind. Do not be brave. Be absent. Absence. The one thing she had never been good at. In emergencies, she filled space. At the hospital, she was a person-shaped solution. Even at home, in her old apartment, she had lived like glue. The idea of making herself not here felt like the opposite of survival. Her phone vibrated face down. She didn't touch it. A second buzz, a third, spaced like breaths, then nothing. The house listened to her listening. She lay back and fixed her eyes on the hairline crescent in the paint until she memorized its curve the way nurses memorize arrhythmias. Then, without turning off the lamp, without saying any name, not hers, not his, she closed her eyes and practiced leaving. She began with small departures. A breath in which she did not think. A minute in which she became only the weight of her body. A span of time measured by the cooling of sweat on her upper lip. She let the thought of herself slide to the edge of the bed like a purse left on a chair. She woke at dawn, startled, shoes still by the bed, mouth dry. The lamp was off. She hadn't turned it off. In the thin, tired light, the wall looked normal. The crescent crack was so delicate you could have missed it if you didn't know where to stare. But someone had been here in the night, leaving a note on the inside of her skin, a dull ache under her left collarbone, fingertip-sized, blue leaning like a bruise, resolved. It hurt when she breathed too deeply. It hurt like a print. She went to the kitchen and found a line of salt across the doorway, broken in one small place, as if a toe had scuffed it gently, not stepping through, just testing texture. She fixed it with shaking hands, then tore a paper towel and stuffed it under the baseboard where the wall had pressed, as if a plug could matter. The phone lay on the pillow where she had left it. When she picked it up, the unknown number sat on the screen, like a patient on a gurney. She swiped into the messages. "May I come through? You said you were tired." "I can carry the tired," say the name that opens. Her thumb hovered. She typed nothing. She deleted the nothing. She turned the phone off and slid it into the freezer because the cold seemed like a better prison than her pocket. When she opened the front door for light, she found May already on her porch across the street, coffee mug in both hands, watching as if her gaze were a leash. May didn't wave. She lifted her chin once. A question. Alina nodded once, twice, her own chin heavy as a blood drop. She wasn't okay, but she was here. And the wall, for now, was just wall. From deep in the house, through floors and joists and copper, came a sound like a very old person deciding to breathe again. She stepped back over the salt as if stepping across a line she'd drawn in her life. Shoes near the bed. Curtains open. Name quiet. On the mantel, the diary waited, heavy with someone else's future. She put her palm flat on its cover, just for a second, and felt, beneath the cardboard and the paper and the ink, the small thud of a story that had not finished learning how to ask. There are doors you open, and doors that open you. She dressed for work, and chose neither. She left the house ajar only to sunlight and locked every other part of herself she could. Behind her, as the latch caught, the wall made a sound like a patient sighing into anesthesia. Not awake. not asleep. Hovering. And between those two states is breath in, the breath out, was where Alina would learn to live. The house didn't want visitors. That was the thought that gnawed at Alina as she stood in the doorway, watching Sana step over the threshold with 2 plastic bags of takeout. The smell of garlic naan and butter chicken rose bright against the stale, metallic tang of the hallway. For a fleeting second, it almost felt like her old life again, the evenings when Sana would insist on feeding her after a long shift, laughter softening the hospital's edges. But the air inside the house shifted the instant Sana entered. It wasn't temperature, no draft, no breeze, just a pressure, like a room holding its breath. "You weren't answering texts," Sana said, brushing past her and setting the food on the counter. "So I brought dinner. You look like hell. By the way," Alina forced a smile, "that's just me now." "Don't joke, you've lost weight. And your eyes?" Sana leaned closer, studying her. "You're not sleeping." "I try," Alina said. Her voice sounded brittle even to herself. Sana unpacked the food, muttering, "Try harder." She grabbed 2 plates from the cupboard, as if the house belonged to her too. That small act of normalcy was like a warm hand pressed to Alina's chest. But behind them, the wall creaked. It was subtle, one long groan, as if something large shifted inside the plaster. Sana froze, spoon hovering over the rice. "What was that?" Alina's tongue felt thick. Old house, pipes. The lie tasted like ash. They ate, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the living room. The diary sat untouched on the coffee table, its spine bowed like something alive. Sana noticed it, of course. She always noticed everything. "You've been reading again," Sana said. "Whatever's in there, it's making you worse." Alina shook her head. "It's not the diary, it's the house." Sana's fork stilled. "You really believe that? Don't you?" Alina's voice cracked. "You felt it already." As if in answer, the light flickered overhead. A hum filled the room. Not electric, not mechanical. It was the deep animal hum of breath drawn slow through a hollow body. Sana went rigid, her plate tipping into her lap. "Alina." Her voice was low, warning. "There's someone else here." "No," Alina whispered. "Not someone. Something." It began with shadows. On the far wall, just above the baseboard, darkness thickened, bleeding outward like ink dropped into water. The V pattern twisted until it resembled fingers pressing outward from inside the plaster. Sana scrambled to her feet, stumbling backward. "What the hell is that?" "I told you," Alina said, her throat tight. "It presses." The wall bulged, plaster straining into a swollen dome. Sana grabbed Alina's arm. "We're leaving." "Right now!" But the door slammed shut. Not the wind, not a draft. Slammed. The frame shook with the violence of it. Sana screamed, fumbling at the knob, but it wouldn't turn. The hum deepened, and then it struck. Something invisible whipped. Across the room, a violent gust that carried weight. Sana was hurled sideways into the wall with a sickening thud. She collapsed to the floor, coughing, gasping. Alina lunged toward her. "Sana!" But before she could reach her, the unseen force dragged Sana backward, scraping her across the rug. Her nails tore at the fibers, leaving streaks. Alina dove, catching her hand, anchoring her. For a moment it became a tug of war, Alina pulling against the weight of a thing she couldn't see, only feel. Her shoulder burned. Sana screamed, "Let her go!" Alina shouted into the room, into the walls, into the breathing darkness. The house answered. On the wall above them, lines appeared. Not carved, not painted, written in wet arterial red that glistened under the lamp. The words dragged themselves into being, stroke by stroke, as though an unseen hand scrawled them with blood. "You promised to stay." Sana's eyes widened in horror. "Alina, what the fuck is that supposed to mean?" Alina couldn't speak, her throat locked, because she knew. Somewhere deep, where memory and dread coiled together, she knew. The first night she signed the lease, she had whispered to herself, "I'll stay, no matter what, just 1 year, I'll stay." The house had listened. The force yanked Sana again, slamming her against the baseboard. She cried out, her forehead splitting. On the edge, blood trickled down her face, warm and bright. "Stop!" Alina screamed. "It's me you want, not her." The words on the wall shifted, blood smearing into a new shape. "Then let her go." Alina's stomach dropped. What? Trade. The unseen grip tightened around Sana's ankles, dragging her upward toward the bulging wall. Her body thrashed, heels kicking against plaster that flexed like skin. A sound rose from inside, hungry, eager. Alina's mind split into two frantic halves, the nurse calculating injuries, the woman hearing the echo of her own whispered promise. She did the only thing she could. She lied. "I'll stay," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll stay forever. Just let her go." For one agonizing second, nothing happened. Then Sana dropped. She hit the floor hard, coughing blood into her palm. Alina scrambled to her side, holding her, rocking her. "It's okay. You're okay." But Sana's eyes locked on the wall behind her. Alina turned. The words had changed again, forever. That night blurred into blood and panic. Sana's cut wouldn't stop bleeding. Alina pressed towels against it, whispering half prayers, half curses. Her phone had no signal. Every call she tried dropped before ringing. When she finally carried Sana into the bathroom to wash the wound, the mirror trembled. Not the glass, the reflection. In it, Alina saw not her own frantic face but herself, standing utterly still, smiling faintly, a shadow pressed against her back. She dropped the mirror with a crash, shards scattered across the tile like ice. Sana groaned, her body limp. "Alina." "We have to get out." "I can't," Alina whispered. "It won't let me." Her reflection in the shards smiled wider, mouthing a word she couldn't hear. At dawn, Sana stirred, fevered and pale. Alina held her hand, listening to the house breathe around them. The blood on the wall had dried into rust-colored letters, flaking like scabs. But the message remained. "You promised to stay." Alina knew then what May had warned her. Promises were keys, and she had given the house one. It wouldn't let her break it, not without taking something in return. The clocks lied first. Alina woke at 2:11 a.m. and blinked once, twice, 3 times, the way she always did, to coax herself back into a body that felt borrowed. The house breathed its slow animal breath, the exhale inside the walls, and the living room lamp hummed a thin, exhausted note. She was on the couch, a throw blanket crooked over one knee. The diary lay open on the coffee table, spine splayed like a ribcage. She reached for her phone. The lock screen said 2:12. She blinked. It was 4:56. Her mouth went dry. She hadn't moved. Her hand still hovered inches above the phone, as if time had skipped in the space between intention and touch. She forced a laugh that sounded too loud in the stillness and told herself the battery must be failing, the house wiring must be weird, the network time was off. The wall behind the couch inhaled. The drywall creaked like a lung filling. "Not funny," she whispered. Silence folded back over the room, dense as a blanket. It was not the kind that calms, it was the kind that rearranges the furniture in your head and waits to see if you notice. She checked the oven's green digits. 4:56. The microwave agreed. The wall clock's second hand jerked forward, then backward, then settled into a sulky tick. In the window, she could see her reflection. A pale woman with eyes too wide and a mouth too small, hair gathered in a messy knot that did nothing to tame the static of fear around her. Behind her reflection moved a smear of darker dark that might have been the hallway. She turned. The hallway was empty. The smear remained in the glass. Alina took the diary and closed it. Even the soft thump of paper on paper sounded like a door shutting on something that wanted to stay open. "Tomorrow," she told herself. "Tomorrow I'll call a contractor. I'll tell Sana I'm moving out." But even as she thought it, the words on the living room wall, "Old blood turned to rust," seemed to darken, to freshen in the corner of her eye. "You promised to stay." "I didn't promise," she said to the room, to the lamp, to the terrified bones inside her. "I said it to myself. That's not a contract." The house drew another breath. The lamp hummed a note lower, then higher, then settled. She set the diary down and stood. Her knees wobbled. In the bathroom, she splashed water on her face, cold, metallic, an aftertaste of coins. And then she saw the scratches. 3 thin lines raked down the inside of her forearm, the kind a cat might leave if a cat had fingers. The skin was raised, angry. She had not felt them until now. When she touched them, they stung as if the pain had been waiting for permission. "I didn't do that," she told the mirror. Her reflection didn't argue, but it looked like it wanted to. She reached for the first aid kit under the sink and lost it to the chaos of bottles and mismatched bandages. When she looked up again, the mirror showed her a fraction of a second earlier, her hand still reaching. She jerked backward, and the glass caught up, a ripple dragging her face into its proper present. The ripples left the faintest suggestion of someone else standing shoulder to shoulder with her before the surface smoothed. She pressed the bandage on with shaking fingers and backed out of the bathroom. In the bedroom, her bed lay as she'd left it. Sheets untidy, dent of her body still visible. She had no memory of lying there. She lay down now and tucked her bandaged arm against her chest, the way you tuck a broken promise where it won't catch on anything. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the window was grey with morning, and her phone said 11:14. Her mouth tasted like dust. Her arm throbbed. She sat up too fast, and the room tilted, then steadied. She smelled coffee. The kitchen was empty. The coffee maker's blue light burned, cheerful and dumb. The carafe held half a pot. There was a mug on the counter, one she never used because the handle had a hairline crack. Steam curled from it. She had not made coffee. She had not poured. The house had. Her skin prickled. "No," she said to the air. "We're not doing this." The scald of coffee against her tongue was startlingly normal. She drank too much and coughed and cried a little because the heat shocked tears out of her like a blunt instrument. She put the mug down and stared at the wall. The letters there, "You promised to stay," gleamed faintly, as if licked by something with a patient tongue. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sana. "How are you? Fever's down. Head's a drum, but I'm alive. Call me." Alina typed, "I lost time." Then erased it. Typed, "I'm okay. Rest. I'll bring soup." Sent nothing. Set the phone face down as if that could stop the way the house listened. She went to work. She told herself she would leave early, that she would spend the afternoon in a coffee shop with 2 bright lights and a noise level that made thought impossible. She would find a short-term sublet. She would not come back after dark. In the hospital parking garage, her car door stuck, then opened, then felt like it had decided to be heavy today. The elevators were lined with mirrored steel. In them, she was accompanied by 3 Alinas, none of whom looked well. On the oncology floor, the hallway had the waxy shine of a place kept too clean for comfort. She changed, clipped her badge, and stepped into the wing where her hands still knew what to do, even when her mind didn't. The day proceeded in slices. She spoke to Mr. Collins about his appetite, to Mrs. DeLeon about her son's visit, to a dozen other patients about dozens of other manageable pains. The repetition soothed her. The building's hum was different here: refrigeration, ventilation, fluorescent ballast, a mechanical chorus that left no room for the house's breath. At 10:08 a.m., the intercom squawked and gave birth to silence instead of a voice. The unit froze for a beat, then resumed. Alina glanced at the wall clock. 10:08, she bent to scan a med label. When she straightened, the clock said 1:53. She looked to the window for confirmation. Outside, the light had moved as if someone had dragged the sun across the sky with a hook. Her hands were mid-task, a syringe poised above a port she had no memory of prepping. Her charting app showed entries in her voice, in her style, in the shorthand she used when the day ran hot, but she had not made them. She checked the vitals she'd apparently taken. They were correct. The doses she'd apparently administered matched the schedule. Her body had been working while she'd been... what? Asleep? Away? Turned slightly to the side and sat down on a shelf. She wiped her palms on her scrub top, suddenly sure some part of her was still in the living room, still reaching for the phone at 2:12 a.m., arm hovering forever above a moment that wouldn't finish. "Alina," said a voice behind her. Dr. Patel, eyes kind, mouth concerned. "You all right?" "Yeah," she said, too fast. "Did we, wasn't it just morning?" He frowned. "Night shift rough?" "I'm on days." He studied her. "Go drink water, sit 5 minutes." Then softer. "If you need to tap out, we'll cover." She nodded and walked to the staff lounge on legs that didn't feel attached right. In the lounge, the radio someone had left tuned to an oldies station whispered static. Then the static organized into a voice that wasn't a voice, a sigh shaped. Like words, "You are not alone." Her paper cup crumpled in her hand. She turned the knob. The radio kept whispering, louder now, consonants peering through the mist. "You are not alone. You never were." The water jug gurgled like a laugh. Alina pushed the radio's power button. The whisper continued for a long, stubborn second after silence should have fallen, then faded as if it had gone to stand in the corner and wait. She left the lounge. The hall seemed longer than before. The waxed floor reflected the ceiling lights in a white river that went on and on. A wheelchair sat empty at a bend, with its footrests askew, as if someone had been lifted from it in a hurry. A nurse called her name from the nurse's station. She turned her head, and the hall was short again, the wheelchair gone, the reflections behaving themselves. When she finally made it outside for a breath of air, the day had curdled toward evening. She had missed lunch. She had missed 2 hours she had planned to hold on to like a rope. Her phone showed a call from Sana she didn't remember ignoring and a voicemail she couldn't bear to hear. She pressed play anyway and listened to Sana's voice laced with reprimand and care. "Text me you're alive," Sana said. "Say the word and I'm coming to get you. I mean it. I'll bring a crowbar if I have to." Alina smiled despite the ice in her gut. "I'm alive," she recorded. "Don't come tonight. Rest, please." "Come here," the voicemail said, except it didn't. That was the house using Sana's voice, trying it on for size. The automatic doors opened and closed, opening into evening. She drove home because there was nowhere else to go that wouldn't feel like lying. The street was the same dull row of one-story answers to old questions. The house waited, patient as a tumor. Inside, the air was cooler than outside, as if the house had its own weather. The lamp turned on without her touching it. She said, "No," and turned it off. It turned on again. "Fine," she said. "Fine." She took the diary to the kitchen table and did not open it. The coffee mug with the hairline crack stood where she'd left it. A ring of dried brown circled its base like a crop mark. On the counter, someone had set a plate with 2 slices of toast, both buttered to the exact edges the way her mother used to do it. She lifted one. It was cold. She put it down. "You can stop," she said. "I'm not hungry." The refrigerator motor kicked on and then became the house's breath again, drawn long and patient through the ribs of the walls. Her bandage had loosened. She peeled it off. New scratches had appeared beside the old. 3 parallel, 3 more. Beside them, like tally marks made by something that had never learned numbers, only need. She didn't remember making them. She didn't remember the sting. They were just there, a history her skin had decided to write without her. She cleaned them carefully with saline and gauze. When she finished, her phone said 8:07. She blinked. 12:31. She sat very still like prey. The house let the seconds pass for a little while to lull her. She dared to think she'd made it through something. Then time hiccuped, and she was standing in the hallway, staring at the door to the small room she hadn't gone into since the first week. She was breathing hard, as if she had been running in a dream. The knob was cold under her palm. She did not remember deciding to stand. She did not remember walking down the hall. The door opened a whisper. Inside, the air was old with dust and lemon oil. The little room was no bigger than a closet with ambitions, a narrow window, a child's dresser whose paint had learned to blister, a chair with a blanket folded over the back, and a book on the seat. On the wall, lower than an adult's eyeline, someone had drawn a bloom of blue dots with a wax crayon. The dots were the exact shade of the thrift store vase on her table, the exact shade of the letters on the living room wall when they had been fresh. She crouched. The wax was shiny in places, rubbed smooth by small fingers. In the corner, a thumbprint. "You were here?" she said without meaning to. She didn't know who she meant. The room breathed back. It knew. The book on the chair was not a book. It was a thick bundle of paper wrapped in twine, the ends sealed with brittle wax, stamped with a shape that might have been a hand. She touched. the seal, and it crumbled like old sugar. She hesitated, waiting for the house to object. It did not. It waited with her. She untied the twine and opened the bundle. Inside were photographs, Polaroids, out of focus, underexposed, of a girl in this room, in this chair, in this house. The girl's face was always partially obscured by motion or glare. In some, the girl slept. In others, she sat very still and stared at something to the left of the camera. In one, her mouth was open in a small O of surprise or pain. The blue dots on the wall behind her were brighter than in life, as if the film remembered better than paint could. Between two photos, something scratched at the paper. Not sound, text. A scrawl in pencil that dug too hard and left furrows. He comes when it's quiet. If I talk, he gets bigger. If I don't, he gets heavier. Alina pressed her thumb to the words, as if the girl might feel it through decades. The paper was cool. Her own scratches prickled, a chorus answering a solo from long ago. Behind her, the hallway light dimmed, then brightened. The door brushed the back of her shoulder, closing on its own. The room warmed, not with air, but with presence, as if the walls had gathered closer to listen. A thread of sound unwound from inside the plaster. It was not the house's breath. It was a human sound, a voice from the next room over in a house that had no next room. A whisper with weight. "You are not alone," Alina swallowed. "I know, you never were." Something touched the back of her neck, not flesh, not draft, a pressure, like the memory of a hand once laid there briefly in comfort. Her entire spine tried to stand up at once. The photographs trembled in her fingers, edges clicking. "What do you want?" she asked. The question felt wrong as soon as it left her, mouth cheap and too small. The answer came not in words, but in subtraction. The room shed a minute. Her phone ticked from 12:31 to 12:32 and then to 1:49, the numbers dragging like heavy furniture across a floor, leaving gouges only she could see. "Stop," she whispered, suddenly winded. "Please, I need it, I need—" "The time. It's mine." The whisper softened, as if turning its head. "Mine too." The blue dots on the wall were brighter now, though the light had not changed. They formed a shape she hadn't noticed before. Not random, not decorative. A map. A scatter of points that, if her eye connected them in the right order, made a corridor where there was none. She stood, and the dots seemed to move upward, as if rising to meet her. She held the bundle of photographs like a shield and stepped backward, out of the little room. The door touched her shoulder again with the soft impatience of a parent coaxing a child out of a museum. In the hall, the air was cooler. The living room exhale resumed. The lamp exhaled its hum. The clock over the TV read 3:03. She didn't know which version of 3:03 it was. On the wall, the letters had changed without her watching them. They were still the same color, the same gory serif, but the sentence had learned a new word. "You promised to stay. We promised too." "Who's we?" she asked, throat dry. The house did not answer with language. It answered with presence. Many presences, as if the walls were full of small breaths, layered on big ones. For a moment, the silence calibrated into chorus. The sense of more than two, more than 10. The sense of a crowd that had learned to be quiet out of politeness or fear. She swayed, dizzy with sudden company. The diary on the coffee table had crept half an inch toward the edge. She hadn't seen it move, but it had. She set the photographs beside it, untidy, wax crumbs still clinging to the twine. A page had turned while her eyes were elsewhere. The entry that showed now was one she didn't remember reading. The handwriting had gotten sloppier as the pages went on. Letters clawed into paper like scratches into skin. "He taught me to be small," the girl had written. "He taught me to lose time so I could fit." Alina closed the book gently. "I can't leave," she said to the air. "But I can open a door, if there is one." On her forearm, the tally marks itched. She counted them without meaning to. 6. No. A 7th raised itself under her skin, a welt inflating into existence like a bruise happening in reverse. She gasped a little, out of surprise more than pain. In the kitchen, the refrigerator cut off. In the sudden hush, she heard a third breath join the room's two. Her own, the house's, and another, higher and faster, like a child waking from a nap. "You are not alone," the whisper said again, nearer now, at her ear, as intimate as a confession. She nodded, eyes burning. "I know," she said. "I know." "You never were," it said, and the words fogged the air like winter. Alina stood very still, as if any sudden motion might knock the moment down. Then she reached for the lamp and turned it off. Darkness took the room with care, making space for the outline of the window, the paler rectangle of the rug, the ghost square where the coffee table stood. In the dark, she was not alone, and this time the fact steadied her instead of undoing her. "Okay," she whispered, into the thick of it. "Okay? Show me how to listen." Time, for once, did not leap. It lay down beside her like a dog that had finally decided she was safe to sleep next to. In the dark, something in the wall shifted, closer to the surface, or maybe closer to leaving it. The blue map on the child's room wall burned behind her eyelids when she closed them, a corridor that might exist if she made her mind the right shape. Somewhere between one blink and the next, she slept. When morning found her on the couch, her phone said 7:01, and her arm showed 8 marks arranged like compass points. She did not remember new pain. She remembered only the voice, the plural, the feel of company like hands under the cold water of her life, lifting. On the wall, the sentence had been edited again by the quietest editors imaginable. "You promised to stay, we promised to guide." Alina breathed with the house and the thin third breath and felt, under the dread, a small, sharp thing bloom. Not joy, not even hope. Direction. The first truth arrived as a smell. Alina was halfway to the front door with her bag and keys when something sweet and old threaded the air, lemons and starch and a ghost of violet soap. It loosened a drawer in memory that had swollen shut, a winter afternoon, an iron hissing on a towel, a woman's hands folding edges to meet edges. "Aunt Mira," she said before she could stop herself, and the house seemed to inhale at their name. She put her bag down. The living room lamp obediently brightened, then dimmed, like a pupil testing light. On the coffee table, the diary had shifted again toward the edge, its ribbon marker hoisted like a flag. The bundle of photographs she'd found in the small room had fanned themselves into a messy constellation. One had risen to the top. A girl, turning her head mid-blink, that same unfocused surprise, that same blue spatter on the wall behind her. Except now that her nose was full of the particular soap and lemon of a woman she hadn't spoken aloud in years, Alina saw it. Not just a girl, not just any girl. The angle of the jaw, the little scar by the left brow from a childhood fall on the church parking lot curb, the dimple that only appeared when she didn't mean to smile. "Mira," Alina whispered, and the whisper did not leave the room. It landed in the wall like a small bird settling into the hollow it had made 1,000 times. A tremor of pressure climbed the back of her neck again, that not quite hand. For the first time she didn't flinch. "I thought you were a story," she said, and the confession knocked something loose inside her chest. Family law. Aunt Mira had run off. Aunt Mira had gone north. Aunt Mira had been too wild for Houston weather, always said with a laugh too quick and a glance away too practiced. Her mother never lied, she edited. Alina slid onto the couch and pulled the diary into her lap. The cover felt warmer than the room. She flipped back past the last entry she'd read, then father, chasing the handwriting as it sharpened from clawed lines to careful letters. Near the beginning, the date format changed to the one her grandmother used on grocery lists. On a page, softened by touching, a familiar cursive crooked its way down the lines, calm and patient, and a little stubborn. Mira Lorena Vale, Monday. Alina's throat made an involuntary sound, half laugh and half sob. The page smelled faintly of iron and lemon oil, as if it had learned perfume by proximity. She read. "I am not afraid of the house," Mira had written, in a hand that was almost a school copybook and almost a weather report. "I am afraid of what happens to a promise when it has no one left to be made to. He listens when it's quiet. He is not the only one." Alina pressed her palm flat over the name as if blessing it, as if checking for a fever that never cooled. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she asked the room. "Why keep you a rumor?" The house's breath deepened. For a second only, the nails in the studs made a sound like teeth. Her phone buzzed across the table. Mum glowed on the ER screen. Alina stared at the name, at her own face ghosted above it in the black reflection. and swiped. "Lie to me gently," she said, helplessly, as greeting. Her mother didn't laugh. "You sound tired," she said, which was another way of saying you sound like you have been living in a house that files down sleep into powder and blows it away. "I made caldo, come get some." Did I have an aunt named Mira? The spoon clinked 3 states away. Alina pictured her mother leaning against the sink, the phone wedged between shoulder and cheek, the way she always did when she didn't want to be caught needing 2 hands for steadiness, silence stretched like a rubber band. "You found the diary," her mother said at last, not a question. Alina closed her eyes. "You knew." "I knew there was a book. I didn't know it still breathed." That's not an answer. Across the distance, her mother exhaled. "Your grandmother." "I had 2 daughters," she said. "Me and Mira. One stayed and married and learned how to keep the world from moving the plates. One did not. She rented the old Heron Street house with a boy who loved her in small ways and left her in larger ones. The boy went. The house stayed. Mira stayed. With it because she promised to, because somebody must have asked. When she stopped coming to Sunday dinner, your grandmother said, 'Let her be.' And I said, 'We should call the police.' And your grandmother said, 'Which ones? The ones who laugh at girls who paint their eyes?' And then?" Alina asked, though part of her wanted to hang up and let the house answer. "And then we stopped saying her name in the kitchen because names make gates," her mother said, and her voice thinned to something Alina had never heard from her. Shame worn thin with use. "We stopped saying her name in front of your grandfather because he believed that a lost thing is a chosen thing. We took what we could bear, and we buried the rest. We said she ran off. We said she liked the north. We said she wanted a different sky." "You buried her," Alina said softly. "We buried the sentence, not the girl. She wrote you." Alina said, "In this, she wrote you?" "Of course she did," her mother said, and now there was a tremor under the words that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been nailed down. "She wrote me, and I did not answer loud enough. That is my curse, and my inheritance." The word landed like a coin in water. Curse. Alina's mouth went dry. "Don't say that like it's poetry." "It isn't," her mother said. "It's accounting." The house took a breath that had weight. The letters on the living room wall, "You promised to stay. We promised to guide," looked freshly wet again, as if ink could sweat. "What did she promise?" Alina asked. "To whom?" "Her." Mother was quiet long enough for the line to crackle. "Your grandmother believes in bargains," she said finally. "Not with men in crossroads hats, with houses, with places. When the flood took the first house on Jackson, she made a pact with the next roof. She broke bread in the doorway and sprinkled salt in the corners and said, 'Keep what I love and I will keep you full and clean and mended.' She always said every place wants to be a home instead of a hole. All it needs is to be fed. But she never told me the other side of the deal. There is always another side." "You're telling me Abuela fed a house?" Alina said, mostly to hear how absurd it sounded. It didn't sound absurd. It sounded like a recipe. "I am telling you she believed care keeps curses from growing teeth," her mother said. "But care can be a curse if you mistake it for obedience." Mira took the practice and made a promise too large to carry alone. She thought, the house was a child to be soothed. It wasn't. It was a mouth to be minded. The wall exhale hushed to a smaller animal, listening the way dogs do when people say the names of anyone who ever loved them. "You sent me here," Alina said. "You co-signed the lease." "Yes," her mother said, the word flat and without excuses. "Because you said you wanted somewhere cheap and old and quiet, and I thought, a house that knows how to be kept is better than one that has never been made to mind. Because I thought I could watch the weather from here and call when the pressure dropped. Because I thought I could do better by you than I did by her." "So sacrifice," Alina said. "So betrayal." She let the words be ugly in her mouth. "So curses." "So family," her mother said. And now she did laugh, one hard cough of it that had nothing like humor in it. "We inherit each other's unfinished work and unfinished wounds." Alina looked at the little room's door, at the blue dots in their map under the cheap eggshell paint. They had sharpened overnight, or else her eye had. The corridor they made in her mind was clearer. "I think she's still here," she said. "I think more than one she is still here." "I think so too," her mother whispered, so low Alina had to press the phone into her ear like medicine. "I think that house keeps what it's given, kindness or cruelty, until someone teaches it to let go." Promise me you won't do it alone." Alina opened her mouth to promise. The lamp flickered. The wall breathed in. The call dropped to dead air as if a tongue had pressed down on the little red button inside the world. "Of course," she said to the ceiling, to the house, to her own traitor heart. Of course you would. The room felt busier now, as if everyone she had ever loved had stepped closer without moving. The diary lay open to an entry in Mira's hand, dated a week before the entries had changed shape and slurred. The lines were straighter. The thinking was not, "I will not feed him fear anymore," Mira had written. "I will feed him truth. I will make him small by naming him." Alina licked her lips. "Name him then," she said. And the name came not from her, but from a place in her ribs that had known it a long time. "The man behind," she said, and as soon as she made the shape of it with her mouth, the house hissed a little, like water on a hot pan. "Behind what?" she asked the air, and the answer was a pressure on her back, for an instant, a joking shove between siblings, behind everything. A low, steady hum swells, a glass ticks as it cools. She stood. "I'm not running," she said. "You want a promise? Here's mine. I won't leave until the people you're holding can." The letters on the wall bled as if somebody inside the plaster had bitten their lip. The kitchen light clicked on of its own accord. In that clean square of brightness, something waited on the table that hadn't been there. A folded cloth napkin, old and white, with a lemon blossom embroidered in one corner in yellow silk. Alina recognized the stitch. Her grandmother's. Hands had taught it to her in Augusts on a porch that had sagged like a shrug. She unfolded the napkin, and a circle of salt rolled to the table like a quiet coin. "Okay," Alina said. "Okay." She carried the salt to the little room. The blue dots on the wall stared back like patient eyes. She pressed the salt into the corners, 1, 2, 3, 4, the way her grandmother had taught, and her mother had refused to name. The air pushed against her skin like a cat leaning. "This is mine," she told the room. "That's yours. We can share, but we do not swallow." The house listened. She could feel it considering. The wallpaper seam breathed in and out. From the hallway, a new sound, wet, slow, made her stomach fall a floor. She turned. The letters in the living room changed while she watched them, every stroke a tongue of blue flame. "You promised to stay. We promised to guide. He promised to keep." "Who is he to you?" Alina asked, and the house answered with a shape, not a word. The outline of a man where no man stood, a darkness against darkness that made sense only because her eyes refused to resolve it. Not tall, not short. Placed the way an absence is placed, exactly where the body should be. Behind the couch, behind the door, behind her. She didn't turn, she set the salt down. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, and the lie tasted almost like sugar. The not man moved, or the air did, toward the child's chair. The bundle of photographs fluttered and settled, and one slid off the top and tacked itself under her palm. Mira in the doorway of this same room, mouth half open, eyes not looking at the camera, but just to the side, where the behind had stood. Even then, Alina set the picture upright against the baseboard. "Here," she told the not man. "Look, she was a person, not a promise." Something in the wall creaked, a sound like something old forgetting how to be heavy. She felt for the diary with her free hand, found it open to a single short line. In the same practiced hand, "He keeps what we hide." Alina laughed, a small, cracked thing. "Of course he does," she said. "Of course, then we don't hide." She went to the living room and pulled open the curtains. Light that wasn't generous, that had been hoarded by a grey sky all day, came in anyway and made the air visible in motes. The lamp did not like that. It flickered, and then decided to be a good sport. She opened the hall closet and dragged out what lived there. Old coats that smelled like other winters, a box of dishes nobody had needed, 2 rolled rugs that had learned the shape of their old rooms. She opened doors, she aired things, she put the pictures where the walls could see them, not stuffed in drawers where keeping looks too much like feeding. The house objected, gently at first, clocks stuttering, a draft threading her hair, a nail pinging in a stud, then less gently. The front door swung half shut on its own, the floorboards swelled so the bedroom door stuck. The letters on the wall darkened as if some hand inside the drywall had dug nails into its own palm and squeezed. "You keep what?" "We hide," Alina said, loudly now, because she wanted the neighbors who refused to mow the median to hear her and roll their eyes, because she wanted the city to know how many unburials it sat on. "Then you will starve here." Sudden hush, then a distant, dull knock from behind the far wall. The knock came again, closer, polite. The same rhythm that had taught her the rule back in chapter 1. 3 once, 2 once, then a waiting. The behind had learned manners, from a house that had been fed on lemonade and caution and obedience. "I know you," she said into the corner. "You're not a man, you're the sum of every kept thing that wanted to be spoken and wasn't. You're the interest due on a debt of silence." The house made a sound so soft she nearly missed it. The sound of knots loosening in wet rope. Alina's phone buzzed again. A text from Sana, just 3 words. "Say the name." She looked at the diary and at Mira's careful hand and at her own. "Mira Vale," she said, and the air flexed like a muscle. "Mira Lorena Vale, I am saying you. I am opening the gate." The blue dots in the little room flared, not with light, but with precision. The corridor they made wasn't a corridor. It was a path like in the backyard of a house where a woman had taught 2 girls to walk truer than their knees knew how. An arrangement of will across space. Something stepped out of the wall then, not a body, not a form. A weight leaving, like a thought exhaled after being held too long. For a heartbeat, the lemon and violet smell was everywhere, rich and almost unbearable. Alina sank to her knees the way you do when a plane lands harder than it should, and you realize you've been bracing. Tears came, not from grief, not from relief, but from the body's confused gratitude at gravity behaving itself. On the living room wall, the sentence eased one more time. "You promised to stay. We promised to guide. He promised to keep. We promised to go." "Not all at once," Alina whispered, scrubbing at her face with her sleeve. "Not yet. Not until everyone's accounted for." As an if in answer, a faint patter ran along the baseboards like small hands in applause. She stood, shaky, and faced the not man, who was less now, or else she had grown. "Here is my bargain," she said, and her voice felt steadier than it had any right to. "You stop stealing hours. You stop writing on skin that didn't consent to be a page. You take nothing unless it's offered, and you return what you've been keeping that was never yours. In return, I will say every name the house has swallowed. I will open every door I can. I will feed you truth until you are too small to scare anyone but dust." Silence held. Then from inside the wall, the answer came in the only word it had, learned to say as itself. "Okay." She felt the clock resume its honest tick. She watched the lamp hold steady. She listened to the house breathe, and for the first time since she'd moved in, the exhale sounded less like a warning and more like a living thing doing its best. Alina sat with the diary one more minute. She traced Mira's name with the pad of her finger, the way a child traces letters cut into a headstone and refuses to let the word stone be the last word. "I have you," she said. "I have you now." She closed the book. She texted her mother, found her. Not bones, breath. "I'll explain. Come when you can. Bring lemon soap." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I'm already in the car," her mother sent back. Alina laughed, a sound that didn't hurt. She picked up the salt napkin and folded it over the crumb of Tide inside it like a sandwich for a trip. She stood in the doorway of the little room and looked at the blue map. It looked back, changing as she watched, the dots thinning where the corridor had been most crowded. "Tomorrow," she told the presence, still learning to be smaller. "Tomorrow we keep going." The not man didn't speak. The house did, a single small knock from the inside of the wall, like a thank you from a child who had to be taught the word. Low, resolving pad, fades, with the honest tick of the clock. A distant car door closing outside. Alina listened to the quiet, and for once, the quiet did not kill. It made room. The house learned too quickly. All night it practiced being good. The lamp held steady, the clock ticked without eating minutes. The blue dots in the little room softened like bruises deciding not to flower. When Alina closed her eyes on the couch, she slept in rags and tatters, 10 minutes here, 20 there, but it was sleep, and that alone felt like forgiveness, like a hand unpinning the back of her dress so she could breathe. At 5:11 a.m., the house rehearsed a sigh that wasn't a warning. Dawn rinsed the windows with dishwater light, In the kitchen, the napkin lay folded where she'd left it, salt tucked inside like a small, obedient moon. Her phone buzzed at 5:13, 40 minutes out, from her mother. Then a second buzz, bring the book. If it doesn't want to come, bring the pages it will let you carry. The third text came from Sana, who always woke before bad decisions. Do not be a hero. Be alive. Alina boiled water because every answer she'd ever trusted started with water being made to change state. Steam lifted. The kettle sang low. She poured. The lemon soap smell, Mira's smell, had thinned to a thread she could follow if she kept her eyes soft. She counted her breaths. She counted the doors. She counted how many lies in her life had been paid off in interest by the women who loved her. At 5:29, the quiet changed. Not heavier, narrower. It gathered itself the way a snake gathers before it moves, not to strike, but to teach a shape what it is. The hairs along her forearms lifted, each a needle pointing the same direction. Toward the little room. Toward the blue map. No, Alina said gently. Not yet. We made a bargain. Something inside the wall scratched one long, apologetic line. Okay, it meant the way a child means okay when it is already turning the forbidden knob. Alina set the mug down. The diary waited on the table, closed. She slid her fingers under it. It gave, more like skin than like paper, warmed by proximity. As she lifted it, a fluttering began that she felt more than heard, a soft beating that made her wrists buzz. I know, she said. I know you're tired of being two-dimensional. She slipped the diary into her bag, tucked the salt napkin into her jacket pocket, and left the mug half full on the table. The house did not like that. Cups were for finishing. She could feel it remember a grandmother who never left a dish unemptied. Add it to my bill, she told it, and the light in the hallway dimmed one polite fraction. By 5:40, her mother's tires were making a sound out on Heron Street like fabric being torn carefully down the seam. Alina pictured the old sedan nosing up to the curb, hood grayer than the rest, passenger mirror repaired with a prayer and epoxy, back seat that always smelled faintly of oranges and hand sanitizer. She slung her bag over her shoulder and stepped into the hallway. That was when the walls pulsed. It began like the tide moving under a dock, substance shifting where you cannot see it, announcing itself by what it touches. The paint tremored. The baseboards breathed in a fraction of an inch and out again. The nails pinged in their studs like a choir tuning. Alina put her hand against the plaster and felt it answer. Not a heartbeat. A repetition of hers, half a step behind, as if the house had learned her rhythm and wanted to sway with it. No, she said, softer this time. The front door loomed clean and simple, a rectangle with a faithful latch, the sort of door that had been practicing being a door longer than she had been alive. She wrapped her fingers around the knob. It was warm. It turned. The door would not open. Don't be clever, she said. Her voice shook now, not from fear, from the sudden vertigo of knowing that the thing you love has learned your exits. She pressed. The house exhaled, and the knob rolled under. Her palm just a hair, a we're playing a game motion that made her stomach drop. Her phone buzzed again. I'm here. The 3 dots. Don't let it bargain with you at the door. Doors make liars elegant. Back window. The text carried her mother's voice inside it, the way recipes carry the hands that wrote them. Alina took her hand off the knob. The door clicked, pleased with its own restraint, and quieted. She turned down the hall. The walls pulsed a little faster, like a child trying to match the grown-up's dance. In the living room, the photographs she'd set along the baseboard were tilting, as if a wind from inside the house had licked at their edges. Mira's face moved by increments of shadow. The surprise behind her eyes sharpened into something almost like relief, and then blunted again to the soft focus of decades. Okay, Alina said, because you say okay to babies learning to walk, even when they are walking toward the stairs. Okay, but not now. We'll practice letting go later. We'll practice goodbye. The house did something that felt like sulking. She moved toward the back. The kitchen window above the sink looked out at the narrow yard and the slope down to the drainage ditch where water collected during storms and teenagers smoked during the other kind of storms. She could see the street between 2 pecans, and at the curb, her mother's car, its paint dull and beloved. Alina undid the latch with a fingernail, heavy and simple. She pushed. The window stuck, then inched, then lifted all at once with a sigh like a relieved lung. Cold morning air cat-pawed her cheeks. The smell of the ditch, metallic and green, came in and made the house smell less like history and more like something that had to be mowed. Behind her, the living room light flickered once, twice, as if a giant hand had covered it and removed the hand. Light buzz, a long, low hum eroding into the walls. The blue dots in the little room brightened in a way that pressed on her optic nerve without lighting the room. The behind presence leaned, not forward, widthwise as if the whole house was shifting its weight to block the window without appearing to move. "Don't," she said again, and the word left her mouth and came back shorter, as if the air had taken a toll. She climbed onto the sink, left foot on the counter, right knee bruising the cabinet door, and hoisted herself through the window the way she had at 13 when she'd wanted to practice being a person who exited without explanation. The sill scraped her thighs, her bag knocked against the frame, and the diary thumped her hip with a heartbeat. She swung her feet out into the cold and dropped into the brittle winter grass. The yard had learned to be a yard. It did not grip, it did not pull. But the house, oh, the house had learned its reach. The siding under the eaves seemed to lengthen. The lines of the clapboard fuzzed at the edges as if they were being redrawn and not quite landing on their old places. The shadow the house cast across the grass swallowed the outline of her shoes and kept swallowing, not darker, just truer, until her legs disappeared up to the shins in shade. "Let go," she said. Her breath steamed in front of her, and then the steam curled back toward her mouth as if wanting to be breathed again. Her mother was already out of the car, running in shoes meant for church, not mud. She moved with the economy of someone whose life had taught her not to waste motion. She stopped a yard from the back fence, palms up, as if approaching a skittish animal. "Mi amor," she said, "come away." The shadow did not want her to. The shadow put its fingers in the grass and lifted their black tips, not a threat, an offering, stay, stay and be kept where it is warm and old and known and inside. "Not like this," Alina said to it. "We had a bargain. We made a deal with air in it." The hum in the walls rose a pitch. The whole skin of the house flexed, one slow pulse that made the window frame bow outward, almost invisibly, and then return. The glass panes quivered. The reflection inside them broke like water and reassembled. Alina took a step. The shadow stretched, and the stretched part thinned. She took another step. The shadow thinned further, like taffy wanting its old shape, but choosing to be sweet instead of strong. She reached the fence, slipped through the gap where there had always been a loose board, and found her mother's hand. It was warm and lemon-scented, and shook the way steel does when a train has just passed. "Don't look back yet," her mother said. "We're not Lot's mistakes." They moved together toward the car. The house did not like the idea of being a destination someone could leave. It swelled, not larger, but nearer. The siding seemed to exhale itself toward them. The back stoop pressed forward an inch, as if the yard had buckled. In the kitchen window, Alina's mug slid gently toward the edge of the table and stopped as if a hand had steadied it. "Do not run," her mother said. "Walk as if you've paid the bill." They walked. The air grew thicker, not in front of them but around them, a coat that had been dipped in rain and left to dry on the body. The old oak by the curb creaked. The neighborhood stirred. Someone 2 doors down coughed. A dog 3 houses over barked at a dream, and the sound thinned the pressure, reminded the house that attention makes watchers of us all. At the curb, they reached the car. The metal of the door, when Alina gripped it, felt as alive as the house, radiant with stored morning, faintly sticky with dew. Her mother ushered her in and rounded the hood to slide into the driver's seat, hair coming loose from its braid, the way a tide loosens knots. She turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, and made its familiar tired promise. I can. The rear view showed the house, small, ordinary, a rectangle of wood with a window that needed washing. The kitchen pane gleamed dull and blank. In that blankness waited a reflection, a putty-colored smear of sky, the grey fence, the suggestion of a woman-shaped absence leaving. "Buckle," her mother said. Her hands on the wheel were steady the way bridges are steady. Alina buckled, her bag thumped against the floorboard. The diary settled, as if glad to be contained. Her mother pulled away from the curb. The house followed, not by moving, by refusing, to get smaller in the rear window. Heron Street slid under the tires, mailboxes ticked past. Pecans gave way to crepe myrtles, gave way to a patch of stubborn grass that had never agreed to be a median. The car did its arithmetic and translated gasoline into distance, but in the mirror the house did not recede. The kitchen window kept pace, a square in which light arranged itself into the idea of a face, and then unarranged. The shadow of its eaves lay across the road, even when there were other eaves to do that job. Its pulse went with them, a vibration that turned the rearview's glass into a plucked string. "Don't look," her mother said. "I have to," Alina answered. The road widened. The morning gathered itself into traffic. People with coffee and briefcases only imagined how their lives would break that day. No one knew anything yet. A bus sighed. A child in a puffy coat pointed out the window at nothing in particular and laughed like bells. The city was practicing being a city. It almost worked. The first light they hit turned red too quickly. Her mother braked with practiced mercy. The car stopped. The car behind them stopped. The road lined up all its patience and held it like a breath. In the rear view, the house stood behind them where it had no right to be. The same kitchen window, the same blank pane with a smudge of light inside that refused to name itself a face. The walls in the mirror rippled, the subtle corrugation of old paint remembering humidity, and then stilled. The blue dots that had learned to be eyes stared through the glass without glassing over. "Windows are eyes," her grandmother had said once, wiping Windex in circles, while Alina at 6 stole paper towels for the fun of unrolling. "But eyes are also windows. You watch through both ways or you'll trip on your own feet." The light turned green. The car did not move. Her mother's foot pressed. The engine agreed. The tires wanted. The car slid half an inch and held as if a giant palm had descended from somewhere polite and steady and insisted that this was not yet motion. "Alina," her mother said, the name a prayer and a command. "It wants me to look," Alina said. "It thinks looking means staying. It thinks stories end when people won't meet their own eyes." She turned, not to the rear view, but to the passenger window. The glass there gave back a version of her face that her phone never did, honest in bad light. She raised her hand and touched the pane. Her reflection raised its hand. The cold came into her bones, the way truth does. The house grumbled, metal somewhere far away shifting weight, and for a second the pressure lifted. The car inched, the traffic flowed. She could have kept her eyes forward then, let the city swallow them and squeeze them out somewhere with coffee in their hands and jokes on their tongues about haunted houses and the price of rent. She could have made the world simple by refusing to see its reflection complicated. She looked anyway. The kitchen window in the rear view did not show the kitchen. It showed her from the other side, night pressed behind her as if it had never retired, mouth already open. The glass made a frame of her face, and that frame made her remember every other frame, the diary's margins, the photograph edges, the borders of rooms she had declared safe. Inside that frame, her eyes were wide enough to pick up constellations. Her teeth showed, her throat worked. The sound in the car was tires on wet paint. The sound in the mirror was a scream that had not started yet, but was already an echo. She met her own gaze and felt the old promise re-harden. Be kind before you are brave, but be brave when kindness is mistaken for permission. She reached down without looking and slid the diary out of her bag and opened it with one hand. The pages flipped themselves to the last line Mira had ever written. "He keeps what we hide." "Then watch me," Alina said, and the she in the mirror said it with her, and the house said it with the language it had. A low shudder through the studs, a ripple under the paint, a breath that tried to be a command and failed into a plea. She did not hide. She did not soften. She let her mouth open all the way, and the scream that had been waiting since the first tap on the first night tore its way out, a ribbon that kept its color no matter what light touched it. The window caught it. The window showed it to her. The window showed it to the house. It did not diminish, and it did not break anything but the dignity of a silence that had dressed itself as safety. SFX, the scream, full, human, not pretty. The engine straining distant horns. Her mother's hand found her forearm and held, not to stop, but to anchor. The car lurched forward as if the road had decided to be less possessive. The house in the rear view warped, the way a building does when heat rises off it in August. The kitchen window fluttered with light like a throat. The reflection in it wavered and steadied, and then did something glass is not supposed to do. It leaned toward her, the way a face leans toward another face in the instant before it recognizes itself. The light ahead turned yellow. The car behind them honked, as if rude noises could plow reality. Traffic decided to be itself again. Alina stared into the kitchen window that had followed her across blocks and experiences and decades. It stared back. For a heartbeat scraped thin as a blade, she couldn't tell if the person in the glass was stuck inside it or outside. Then the glass made up its mind. The image flattened. The house shrank, finally, by a fraction that was not a trick of perspective. The rear view gave back a road with houses in orderly recession, plain as arithmetic. Her scream ended because the body is a vessel, and air is water, and you must breathe. She breathed. The window breathed with her. The sound of the engine and the city and the day to be rushed into the car. "Drive," she said, and her mother did. They didn't talk for 3 blocks. At the 4th, her mother laughed once, a small, dangerous sound that meant, "We are alive, and I am just now letting myself feel it." She kept her eyes forward, but her mouth bent. "You broke it," she said. "No," Alina said, fingers still trembling around the diary, as if the book were a pulse. "We watched, so it can't lie about what it is." Her mother nodded. "That's worse," she said. "For it." They turned onto the feeder for the freeway. The day thickened and then thinned again ahead of them, the way cities do. Behind them, in a small house on Heron Street, the walls pulsed, the shadows crawled, the letters on the living room wall faded to nothing, and then reappeared in a hand that had learned to be kinder to itself. The kitchen window watched the street and offered back to anyone bold enough to look, not a promise of protection, not a threat of keeping, but a mirror too honest to flatter. In that mirror, if you stood where the light hit right, and the pulse of the old paint steadied, you could see a woman's face in the reflection of the reflection, the sort of trick only glass and grief can pull. Mouth open, eyes bright, not in terror now, but in a fury that makes room for mercy. You could also see behind her, if you wanted to, every kept name in the house, unspooling like thread. The story does not end there. It does not end anywhere stories end. It continues on exit ramps and in kitchens and in the 3 a.m. quiet when the dishwasher sighs like a tired god. It ends for now here, in a square of glass holding the shape of a scream like a photograph holds light, and in the car's side window where Alina's reflection stares back at her with all the watching the house taught her to do. Her mouth opens again in the glass. The sound is already in the future. The window keeps it like a coin. The window lets it go.